Alright, so I played a game recently called Raging Loop. This is gonna be probably the first true ramble. I pretty much represent my recommendations as rambles, but I just thought it's a better label. Anyway, Raging Loop is about a social deduction game such as Mafia turned into a story set in a rural mountain village, Japan. It's a visual novel with occasional choices. There are no mini-games, puzzles, it's just text, images, sound, and rarely some choices. Getting to certain story points can give unlocks for more branching paths, but generally it doesn't branch that much. Essentially there are only 4 or so routes the player can take, and all of them are done in order. There's some flexibility, but generally everything is very much on rails. Unlike something like Teenage Exocolonist, which had some mini-games and very varied paths depending on the choices, Raging Loop is basically just a fancy book. If you ask me, it's a tad expensive for a book, but considering how long it actually is, there is voice acting for a lot of the lines. In Japanese only though. Some music, art, extra content, actual length of the content, well, all of that combined, I'd definitely say it's a great recommendation. This is me being objective. A very poor, cheapskate, objective nerd. The rest of this, and the length of this, is me being subjective. I think it's fairly obvious that I adored it, and I'm a gigantic sucker for social deduction games, so turning one into a story, as well as trying to tie in mythology, real-life explanations for magical stuff, history made up or not, and just overall have this much effort for something that could have worked without all that. Yeah, I am sold. This is definitely a great visual novel. It reminds me of Danganronpa and Zero Escape. I'd say Danganronpa is worse, and Zero Escape is a bit more memorable, but not necessarily that much better or worse. So I'd put it somewhere in the middle. Well, I revise that later. And by the way, I think the word spoilers might be underselling what I'm about to do, so don't listen to the rest without playing. Please, buy the game, support the dev, give Amphibian some cash. Poor guy doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Or really anyone from the cast, actually. I don't know, maybe it's some problem with the links. Made me wonder if everyone is using pseudonym in case the game actually bombed. Although some voices did sound familiar. Weird stuff. Alright then. Okay. No boy. So the first route. I from the beginning saw it coming. I knew one of the wolves. I can't tell if it was due to just being a hunch or mistrusting the obvious leader, or there was something else. But the important bit was what I saw it coming. What I did not see coming was the second one, which is where it's so genius. As the time went on, the fact that he is a wolf became cemented. The game itself even said so. He's just too smart to be this useless. All of his contributions steered the conversation and confirmed already known facts. We never deduced anything or lead anywhere nobody else hasn't already saw coming. This might have been the most difficult opponent to beat among these people, simply because he never let it show that he is suspicious. As long as the player wasn't a snake, and doesn't directly check him, it will always be impossible to figure him out or point him out as a suspect. But it's a grandpa who really gave me a slip. The whole time I was blinded, thinking that the game is shorter and smaller than it actually was. I believed that the wolves would be those who would make the biggest impact. So the game starts with everyone hating the player, be it directly or through shunning, because it's a rural mountain village where nobody really trusts the strangers. However, there were 2 people who didn't shun the player, Chiemi and Yasu. Since I already saw Yasu as a wolf, it was clear to me that Chiemi would be the best second wolf. She's close to the player, she's friendly, charming, cute, and overall, wouldn't it just be the best kind of story? The one where someone like her stabs the player in the back. But, well, that made me blind to the actual logic, which is probably a lesson to learn for all of us. The smart guy is acting dumb, the scared girl is no longer scared, the grandma, the spiritual leader of the group, was silent, same as the other elder. All of these people have a personality which did not align with how they acted during the feast, which is what should have made them suspicious to me. But I lost. Also, I did not know that there was a possibility of a traitor. Now, since I've played Mafia a lot, got hundreds of games, pretty sure it's over 100, but it was mostly reviewed, so it's not like I'm super experienced. So, anyway, comparing this story to Mafia, the typical Mafia tactics generally boil down to 2 things, as Mafia, I mean. First is the obvious, silence. The less someone talks, the less chances they have to mess up. However, the problem here lies in that everyone's suspecting them. The silent one is very clearly the one who doesn't contribute, so at worst it's a useless teammate, and at best it's a bad guy. Of course, and then they get hanged. Of course there are exceptions, but the rule of thumb is that being silent is frequently messing everything up. Now, the second is lies, the second way to play. Of course, another obvious one, but this one can be executed in a myriad of different ways. Think about how many ways you can fool people. Lie about everything, sprinkle in truths here and there, repeat something someone already said, appeal to emotions. There's definitely more. And these approaches are exactly what has happened. A good Mafia player can make themselves an indispensable member of a citizen team. They become trusted, and despite not really doing much, they instead look like they are doing much. Meanwhile, other Mafia can be sold out if necessary, as long as a smart liar stays safe. So Discord, point out already suspicious people, because of course Mafia knows who actually is on the bad guy's side. So, yeah, it was a good way to do everything. The story was great. I loved the ending, it was romantic and bittersweet. I was left with only a few questions which thus far have not been answered. First, what happened to Rikako and Kaoru? The obvious answer is corruption. However, that means that the two of them murdered either the old man or Mochi. And if it was just one of them, then why did the other one get corrupted? Aside from that, why did Kaoru have some semblance of sanity, of a murderess, while Rikako went completely feral? And what exactly happened during those murders? Why? Now another question is a simple one. During the last screen of this ending at 3 wolves, I assumed that it means that Haru became one. However, later it's implied that badgers die as well, which means there are 2 wolves, and the third one is either an illusion or some sort of new creation. It's just confusing. I can always attribute it to a player dying and having hallucinations. Now, this is not done in order, but this is convenient, so I wrote them like this. After you finish the game, you are given certain things called Revelations. They offer you insight into characters' thoughts, and maybe give some comments or show some events which are not seen in the main story, but they still happen at the same time, just without players' knowledge. I played with all that again, and these are my thoughts as an addendum. So, beautiful. I definitely did not expect Yasu to go through that much torment. Just blindly assumed by the way he acted that this whole thing was his cunning plan and he was twirling his future mustache all the while. Instead, he sacrificed everything for the sake of Chie and Haru. Definitely joined this ending way more with that in mind. At the time I was very much confused by the wording and how it played out, but this explained it all better and shown something else quite amusing. Which is, Miyako, Maiko? A little girl, she has, a few screws loose. Also, it answered what happened to Rikako, and I gotta say, wow. That... I honestly don't even want to say what it is. Like, I know this is all spoilers, but this is the one thing I don't want to explain. So now for the ending 2. Here I was from the get-go gunning for Mochi. He was suspicious, but because of his personality it was difficult to point out why. Again, a hunch. However, unlike Yasuo, I couldn't confirm anything as the game went on, all the way until I got a direct confirmation with the investigation. That's always the best kind of Mafia player. A person who is impossible to read and who always seems suspicious. Generally, these are much more likely to be bad, but as allies they can be useful to break impossible stalemates, as well as sussing out those quiet or people who ingratiate themselves into the group. Aside from him, I was at a crossroads. Considering the first ending, I saw the old man acting aggressive, extremely so, and I was completely sure he is another wolf. However, monkey. Very quickly he is confirmed to be a monkey. That reveal felt clumsy and it felt somewhat false, as if it was some sort of ploy by the wolves. But Yasuo worked too hard and confirmed everything with his personality this time. At no point did I believe he was a wolf, and of course he would have no reason to lie about someone else being a monkey. However, this time someone else was extremely suspicious to me, and it was sweet. Like seeing an old friend after a long break. I don't know why I felt this way, but Chiemi was my target number 2 pretty quickly, and at no point she tried to disprove it. In fact, she acted more and more suspicious more and more often. She was very quiet, and the only time she did talk with was pure emotion and no logic. Trying to misdirect, trying to confuse, also frequently blamed the player character. She was the baddie, and I have to admit, the ending... Boy, that ending... I believe there's something terribly wrong with me. Because having her threaten me, laugh maniacally as she chased down people and eventually murdered absolutely everybody, all that was a huge turn on. She was lovable in the first playthrough, but in the second one I was basically drooling over her. Fuck, am I lonely. Anyway, the story largely played out how I expected it to. Although killing Haru felt pointless. Old man would be mad, but all things considered he lost any semblance of power and influence in the group after the first murder. Grumble now and again, but again, he was a bad target. Takumi would have made more sense to kill. Or Yasu. Essentially, Yasu, Player, and Takumi unraveled the whole web, but with old man being there, he was just a useless loudmouth. Which again reminds me of Mafia. And there are often people who act overly confident and aggressive, only ending up making things worse for the citizens. One thing I was confused by was Rikako. I felt like the game tried hard to sell her as a safe choice. It was as if the writer wanted me to love her. She was adorable, especially with the sounds she made. Something like that. But I never felt what I was supposed to feel about her. It was difficult to describe, as if again the game was trying to make her into an obvious villain or sacrifice. So when the player finally cares about her, boom, backstab! I just never had an emotional response, so to me it was, well, sad to see her go, but it was mostly insulting. It's like, I knew you were trying to play with my feelings, and I just did not appreciate it. Another thing which bears mention is the general mood of these two playthroughs so far. The first ending was melancholic, just sad but bittersweet. Sure, everyone dies, but something about how it ended was just beautiful. The second one felt so much more upbeat. Sure, again, a whole lot of people died, but there is downright comedic moments from time to time, and after all, it doesn't go as badly. Especially when Grandma thinks someone is gonna... It's especially amusing when Grandma thinks someone's gonna have her way with the exotic beauty. It all ended fairly abruptly, and I don't know how to put it. Mean-spirited, depressing, rude, something along those lines. So, addendum, again, Revelations. So as far as the Revelations go, I think this made me realize better how I feel about people, and especially women. Of course, I long for companionship, but I seem to have a certain preference. And what I saw was that depression is attractive to me, both in men and women, although romantically only women, of course. This is all to say what Chiemi went through during this playthrough. It made her so much more attractive to me. The fact that she was going insane, unable to cope with this horrible situation, driven into a corner and stuck with this total powerlessness. She gave up multiple times, but things just kept working out, and it all ended up with Fusaishi showing that he's become unhinged as well, which all culminated with her total meltdown. What is wrong with me? Why is this so attractive to my stupid brain? I don't know. Now, back to impressions. I probably should not have watched the hint corner after that. Because little comment about title of next route being darkness, yeah, I can see exactly where this is going. Probably wouldn't even have paid attention to the title at all, and so I'm both excited and anxious to do route darkness. So, overall, this was a fever dream. I don't know what else to call it but a fever dream. At this point I think I'm kind of messed myself up. There is a little else I do other than go for more rage and loop. These past few days I have just messed up memories. I began to question whatever things actually happened in real life, or it's just some figment of my imagination because of a routine. Also, I have gotten sick. Truly, these past few years were a mess, honestly. I feel like I need some serious talk with somebody about it. But this place isn't it. Just as what I appear to be susceptible to suggestion. And I almost conditioned myself to have the perfect timing for it. I live the sort of life where one could question reality. I suppose escapism is a common way to cope with that, but I started to see problems with the way I do certain things, mainly social media. It's common to think, nowadays at least, that social media is detrimental to mental health. Of course, in moderation, it's a convenience and an easy way to share information with people. And of course, it goes both ways. However, a large amount of people abuse it, and people like me treat it in an especially unhealthy way. Not that I whore myself out for attention that much. Actually, YouTube might be a part of a problem for this as well. That's good, I don't care. Introspection is fun, and so the way I use it is what's called doom scrolling. It's generally applied to news, but I'm bending the term here. It's when a person forces themselves to keep going, keep browsing, watch the sites, the pages, the comments, videos, whatever, and just going over and over despite not enjoying a single second of it. And I've driven myself into a state where I don't even retain information. I'd have hours of lost time every single day. Struggle to string together thoughts, not form arguments, forget Even things which happened hours ago. I could have a conversation and not remember what we talked about. I'd still retain some of it, but crucial pieces of such a recent event were gone. This I abruptly cut after a wake-up call. I simply talked to a friend and could not remember what we talked about. It was time to say goodbye to this unhealthy routine I set myself in. And I'll just explain that it's Reddit. I was browsing Reddit non-stop. I don't know if I'm painting it like the devil, but might as well be the way I used it. Now, you might be wondering, what the hell am I talking about and speaking about this murder game? It's related, trust me on this. Anyway, I started reading books again, as a way to make my head work correctly. To think, imagine, create structure in my mind, instead of just passively watching and absorbing everything. I noticed that whenever my brain started to think, I clicked that little button and went to my favorite sites again. It wasn't joy what drove me there, but habit. The brain was satisfied purely absorbing and completely refused to be engaged. I've had these times when I noticed this and cut myself off. It's a typical thought of an addict. Well, if I can stop it for a day or a few days, then it's not an addiction. So I will just do that and go back. Well, I'm an idiot is what I have learned. And while again, social media isn't inherently evil, it's what it made of me. The addiction and this constant need to spend more and more time there, despite the mind refusing to even retain any information. This is what was so dangerous to me. And so the darkness route. At this point I noticed certain short moments, inconveniences and awkward situations. About that later. Also one important thing was the player character's behavior. The first time the mood was sad, bittersweet. The people here were forced into this tradition by their beliefs, and the player was unwilling, unlucky participant who just so happened to walk by. The second time was the opposite. He wanted to be there, and he did his best to assist and prevent tragedy as much as he could. The third one, well, it's obvious that this was going to go one way. However, what was strange was it didn't seem to embrace the madness, and instead it was this emotionless response to everything. At first. Then there was anger, then emotionless again, then some bizarre camaraderie. The writing changed every time. It was as if the events were shown from the perspective of this man. And so the looping. This entire thing became a routine to him now. People die, he will fake some amount of shock, move on. Never mind the fact that he is the one who did it. It wasn't even a game to him now. Second was the game. The third route was more of a chore to get out of the way. And this resonated with me. Not that I've disliked the game now, but it's been so long, so much of my time has been spent here, and it's not as if I enjoyed it that much. I should probably mention the roles and my thoughts on them as well. I think this time the writer made it a bit too easy. It was more like all the answers were in front of me, and the player, instead of being presented with his vague guesses. So, knowing everyone took a lot of the fun I've had before. Takumi acting a little different to the first loop especially. I understand that the amount of victims made everyone different, as well as the fact that there was a new player, but overall it just wasn't a mystery. It was easy to just die and loop back to know, but it felt as if the game was telling the player to just stop giving a crap and about the other options, just go with the one clear and set route in front of them. There were no keys to unlock on the way, no interesting information revealed in these side paths, it just felt wrong. This is a mystery game, and you didn't get a mystery. Also, I think I should mention the irony of saving the one who proved to be the biggest obstacle. It was like a cruel joke. Here's this character, let's give him a silly fatso design and get him killed. Surely he was gonna be a joke. Of course not. Of course, a much better joke would be the one to play on the player, making him an impossible foe to beat without cheating. Good thing that the player is immortal. Honestly, he'd be my favorite part of this. The Hashimoto, the fat guy. But like I have said already, the writing started to take a turn for the mundane. Hiroaki Fusaishi was becoming fed up with it all, and he found a way to disconnect from the murders and cope by lying to everyone and pretending to be some sort of bad guy, painting himself as the villain and turning into one. Which also meant that whenever there was an obstacle, it was almost a cartoony version of it. A hero figuring absolutely everything out, down to a simple, unnecessary detail. And I very much disliked that. It felt lazy. Not that it's completely impossible to deduce, but it just felt too convenient. Too much of a Batman kind of character with a plan for every eventuality. However, not all of it working out, which again can be chalked up cheating. It is kind of fun to think about it. However, then it actually started coming to a conclusion. And by this point I was a bit sleep deprived. I wanted to go to sleep for hours. And I've been out of both food and drink. not expecting to still be awake. And I've been at hours of it before I even wanted to sleep. So it was hours upon hours upon hours. It's like most of the day was just spent at the darkness route. My mind was pliable, flexible, and ready to embrace anything that wanted to shape it. After all, I've cut out such a huge part of my daily routine, and I've only forced myself to take short breaks from this game just so I don't burn out. I'm pretty sure I did a little bit anyway. So far, the game was good. Very good. After all, I didn't want to get fed up with it due to overexposure. I needed to take those breaks, but I didn't then. So I think it was actually a perfect storm to experience a reveal that dumb. Oh, what a mistake it was to expect this game to have an original and interesting twist. I've played Undertale, one-shot most things by that Pony Island guy. Probably something else I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, by the way, I hate all the games by the Pony Island guy. The Hex was especially garbage. I remember playing Flash games which were ironically bad and making fun of themselves. This concept was new and was not really that new or interesting then, and it especially isn't now. It honestly upsets me what kind of garbage gets attention instead of something better. Anyway, fuck that guy. Just as with throwing in some sort of cosmic entity into the mix is overdone at this point, and then doing what is essentially breaking the fourth wall by introducing the ship into the mix, I can't imagine why even bother playing this game forever. It basically means that everything thus far has been meaningless. All the looping the player has done, any kind of emotional response to suffering, anything. All of it was just a stupid joke done purely for the game designer's amusement. And that it's just insulting. I found it charming in one shot, but that was the only time I found it enjoyable. I went a little long after that, before my pillow called to me, going all the way to the beginning where I saw the key 20. And well, okay, so it coming that there is something special about the looping itself, but I couldn't put it together what exactly was happening, what it was happening to others as well. After all, they are kind of stupid if they know everything that happens and only one person decides to use it to their advantage. But Chiemi established that it's been going for hundreds of loops now. At times, Fuseiji commented that memories were already becoming fragmented, so the same could be true for others. And then the game actually pointed out the inconsistencies, and I have to admit did not notice all of them. But I did actually notice most. The biggest one is probably the one during the second route, where Chiemi is begging, which is close to the end of that story. The mention of a bike probably should have been completely unknown to her. That one I did not notice. This made me realize something. The game actually had a bunch of inconsistencies in it. The easiest one to point out is that looping technically happens all at once. The player character is aware of his countless deaths, but for whatever reason doesn't really mention what those deaths reveal. Again, it can be explained with jumbled memories, but the simplest explanation is that it's a nightmare to write and account for everything that happens. Which is how I've explained the other hints toward other people experiencing looping. And how I explained the inconsistencies thus far. I just thought that it's all some sort of error in translation, or a writer made a mistake, or some sort of subtle nod toward an interference of a higher power, but without outright confirming that it's all the same loop for everyone. So, now I sit here, staring at the game, thinking that I actually hate the big twist, this huge reveal of an eldritch abomination coming to destroy all because Fuseiji killed a few people and made a teen girl fall in love. And so I have to say this, sad. And the fact that my brain now feels like putty because which was thrown down the stairs isn't a good state to be in a game for about going insane in a routine. Honestly, now that I think about it, it's making me wonder that this stopping to question things, being completely ignored, the way I treated myself, my own mind, is kind of similar to how villagers treated themselves. This is why they go along with this crazy game. So everything is related in a way. So I'm sitting here before the last route, or at least what looks like it. I don't know how long it will take, but I'd say what happened thus far after the route darkness is another route, although not direct. It's all about collecting keys from different storylines and moments. A lot of it is tied to Chiemi, a lot of it is mostly about the history. So, addendum. After watching the Revelations, I think that the darkness route was the weakest revelation. It was actually very little revealed. Not very interesting, and mostly this made Kaori show up in a more sympathetic light. And very little else. A few more comments, a few more moments for Rikako to be weirder, but overall, That is, until I got to the hidden branches. First one being siding with Haru. It's clearly meant to be a goofy new Game Plus moment, but I very much enjoyed it. There is just something about having a serious story, writing all this drama, and then looking back at it and having a laugh about the entire damn thing, all the while using self-deprecation and breaking everyone's composure. Okay, now the second one is exactly what I had in mind. Again, this entire video has too much personal info, but I might as well just keep going and admit it. When I saw that giant monster rampaging through Japan, some part of me thought, hey, I wonder what it'd be like to have sex with it. And that is exactly what is implied. The thing which Rikako wanted. Fuseishi just comes out and says it, and they proceed to bang while destroying the world. Yeah, I think this is it. I was hesitant before, thinking that there are some great ideas out there, better execution, writing, whatever. But now, here I am, looking at Rage and Loop, and realizing that it gave me exactly what I wanted. I wanted mystery, betrayal, people going insane, severe depression, whole lot of murder, but then I'm also a horny fucker. And yeah, sure, there is nothing actually shown, but this isn't a porn game. But yeah, I got exactly what I could ever want. This is my favorite visual novel. You win, Amphibian. You win. Now, to the final route, end of addendum. As to what I have predicted, very, very, very little. I've noticed anomalies here and there, but I didn't put together big pictures that Loop was something only Fuseishi and Chiemi experienced. My original idea was everyone suffered from a loop, and just because the outsiders weren't here long enough, they were able to do something about it. And everyone who was in the village for long just lost their minds, essentially. This, however, was confusing because of a journalist. They didn't seem to suffer from the looping, which meant that I was wrong. However, it wasn't outright explained, yet at least, what exactly is so special about these two either. Chiemi was touched by God, but it's not as if it just answers everything, and what exactly does it mean anyway? And Fuseishi is just a dude in the wrong place in the wrong time. So, why them? Why these two? Whatever. Another mistake I made is mention of a fourth wall. Considering where it was going, I instantly assumed that it was going to go for a fourth wall, upon which a character from Hint Corner appeared, which again created a connection with breaking the fourth wall. However, it's treated more as a stand-in. The ship appearing to a player and the ship appearing to a player character aren't necessarily the same thing. They are supposed to be, but just like Rikako from the opening tutorial, it's not the same person. Now, the thoughts about the actual story reveals in the development. Yeah, it's been long, whatever. So, story and development. I very much like Chiemi, and I'd be lying if I said being stuck with her in this loop forever is that bad. We'd never get old, we'd never get tired, never have children or even be able to experience anything except this mountain village, but there's something so enticing about it all. This hellish loop where death and time have no meaning. I cannot grasp the true horror of it, and perhaps I'm just blinded by the idea of sharing my life with anyone, be it immortal or not. In short, I want to gush over it, but I'd mostly be spinning the beans about my mental issues, so moving on. One thing I didn't mention is corruption in the first storyline. That one always didn't sit right with me, despite never knowing how exactly this corruption worked. It was good to know why Rikako was taking over. Next, I've gotten a reveal about the background of a village and religion. Village of hunters, as was said before, with village heads doing their dirty deeds, is already established, of course. However, this entire explanation ran as something very real. It felt exactly like something that could happen. Have neighboring villages, one prospers, other gets jealous or angry due to unfair treatment, and it doesn't truly matter. Uprising happens, certain details warp, it's written down by the victors as this horrible tragedy, which eventually warps into a festival. The interesting, or another interesting thing, is it changed back into horrible tragedy. This entire explanation, quite frankly, dragged on, but I was sucked in. All the historical facts and the developments were fascinating, and I'd love to know more about things like that. I bet rural regions of many different countries have plenty of forgotten history like this. I wouldn't know if this stuff is completely made up or it has a tinge of truth in it, but the important bit is, well, it's a great story and this has something I very much enjoyed. The next one is the Talk with Grandpa. This one I quite frankly believe sucked from a storytelling perspective, but it filled a few holes here and there. So I didn't really learn anything new, but it was good to get confirmation. The problem here is tied to the storyteller. A stoic man, a man of few words with a dark past, talking to someone who's just kicked the crap out of it. It just doesn't lend itself into a good story. The ending, the mention of reconciliation of Grandpa and his granddaughter, as well as his resolve, that was moving. So I enjoyed that. Then it was this little tidbit was just a letdown after a barrage of interesting information before, from the talk with Nosuke. Oh yeah, and by the way, that little opening scene where Fuseishi knocks on the door and then sings a random song and Kyosuke recognizes it. Yeah, that was also a great moment. Okay, next is the mythological background of a feast and gods and whatever else. The talk with Mafia. This was a huge letdown, but it boiled down to being written by the Japanese person. Why it was a letdown, I mean. I am not Japanese. I know very little mythology, and I don't know a good way to learn any of it without having to dig deep and learn completely irrelevant information, which would, quite frankly, not be interesting in any way. Hell, I don't even know my own history that well. I know Greek, Egyptian, and Roman history better than my own. All the folklore, mythology, yada yada yada. So this entire talk with Mafia flew completely over my head. The name dropping coupled with reliance on things which I assume Japanese people learn in school. Yeah, I got nothing from this particular interaction. Although it was cute to see Yasuo expect something shady and end up having an informative talk. That part was adorable. And lastly, the last key in the game, the key one. I gotta say, after all the cool mythology, history, background information, Chiemi lovey-dovey murder vacation, having this douche noodle act exactly how I expected was boring. I thought there'd be something bigger, some massive conspiracy reveal, but wow, that was a gigantic disappointment. What an ultimate letdown. So, addendum, after watching the revelation. So, all those routes, well, there was basically nothing. Only worthwhile thing to mention is that Rikako is messed up. Apparently she does something sexual to cure people. Although, also supposedly she doesn't actually have to do it, but she does it anyway. Because she is a gigantic slut, I guess. Either way, back when everyone was getting sick, as a child of about 9, she raped Masato, who was about the same age, if I understood it correctly. So this plot point is messed up and entirely unnecessary. I don't understand why even have it be a thing. It's like a writer wanted to come up with something truly repulsive and added this. I feel like I'm better off ignoring that this story point actually happened. Okay, end of addendum. So, apparently now it's time for the final loop. And I will see where it leads eventually. For now I'm feeling a mix of excitement, a headache and a bit of a cold. Again, I remind you that I wrote this. I play a route, I write some things down. I play a route, I write things down. I finished everything, then I add the revelation bits. So, again, final route. So, this... yeah, this is exactly what I have wanted all along. It was a little clumsy in the beginning, and the ending was a little frustrating, but overall, this final route was pretty much exactly what I wanted. It is exactly what I would have wanted. The Elder Abomination awakening randomly has been overdone in other stories, and so here it's actually not that much of a big twist. Instead, it's more of a reason for everything. No, well, not everything, but some things. Which... damn, I got nothing. I got no twists, I got the great execution, I've got a romantic ending, and the tongue-in-cheek hint corner was enjoyable as well. I'm honestly frustrated how little I've got to say about the true ending. Usually I'd say, it was all a dream, is about as lazy as it gets, but considering everything was explained vaguely and a lot of things were up in the air, yeah, it's actually working exactly right in this particular situation. This is the only exception I can think of a rule for this is just a dream being terrible. It works. Here, it works. I just don't know. Oh yeah, also the main character is a jerk. Yeah, that's one excuse to complain about everything. I wanted to punch him. He solved everything and all, but I don't know, maybe we should have all died to an Elder Abomination, as long as the jerk doesn't get a happy ending. Rich, successful, wasting his life, having fun with cute girls in the countryside where everyone falls in love with him. What a douchebag. Okay, 0 out of 10, don't recommend the game anymore. No chads allowed in my recommendations. See ya. Oh yeah, and one thing to mention, Meiko. I did not see it coming, but it was not a good mystery or reveal. Either way, clear sequel bait. Also, why exactly did having an actual Satan not disrupt anything? You've got gods made up or real. Murder sprees, Satan is the one who isn't involved in any way. God, I stuttered so much. I don't talk that much usually. Anyway, all that stuff, what happened, all those horrible tragedies, and it doesn't involve Satan. Yeah, that's two glaringly flawed plot points. But I still overwhelmingly approve of this game. I've never been this sucked into a visual novel. I've enjoyed them before, but this is the first one where I had to do this much. So, I guess I'm gonna just keep adding stuff to this little document. At this point I'm about 99% done with everything in the game. As it turns out, the side stories after the true ending are fairly lengthy. I expected a few minutes per each, but it was a lot more than that. There are only 2 left, but I can already admit that these are lower quality and overall just don't flow as well as the main story. In addition, there was a clear budget constraint, as despite promising full voice acting, there are actually much fewer voiced lines when compared to the main story. In addition, there is a lot of babbling which didn't seem edited. So I think that could have been cut out, and the pacing is just off. But I still love them, especially Rikako one. She's just the best. Something truly amusing about her switch from being this timid but firm dedicated priestess into a slutty lazy mess. And then Kiyonosaki acting like a gentleman. No reaction to provocations, showing restraint and endless patience, and even having a chance to show off a cooler side. This story was a great one. The Hokkaido trip one was fairly forgettable. I think after watching Apartment Complex C is that the writer, Amphibian, is focused on an idea of religion and wants to strongly incorporate it into their writing, as in everything they do seem to involve this telling and retelling of their idea of what God is, what religion could do and what it actually does. Just rehashing the same thing over and over, with different perspective on the subjects in all their stories. But they all still end up sounding kind of the same. That's a definitive flaw. Although then again, this was more of Chiemi and the fact that she got turned into an RPG character that is kind of amusing, so it wasn't a complete waste. Next is the Mafia story. It was a bit of a letdown. Again, I feel like a writer suffers from going a bit too far. The old saying of show don't tell seems lost on them, or at least frequently forgotten. To tell a mystery like that, it would be a lot better to ground it in more reality, than peel the layers off and unveil the supernatural. So for example, she doesn't fall asleep, and it's more as if it all plays out normally. There are people, there are trains, but something would just give off this strange vibe, which would only get worse and worse. This would toy with the idea of her fascination with the occult, and mock it, ending on a lesson about messing with things she doesn't understand. Instead, it's a bit too clear-cut and dry. It needs time and subtlety, as well as polish. A fine line like that is difficult to execute right, and I believe this was not done well. Also, I was confused who that entity was supposed to be. Assuming it's Tsuchigomo, I don't understand why and why her. Why now and why her? If anything, it should be Rikako of Usaishi who should have been drawn into this realm. Truly, Rikako would be probably even villain, and he would welcome a distraction. It's not Tsuchigomo, because it got eaten by the black goat, then if it's not Tsuchigomo, then I'm just confused. Regardless, I think the story it just needed more work done, and it could have been blown in a full short spin-off, and actually been very enjoyable. Instead, it's a bit of a disappointment. Also, I'm still sick. Okay, now I'm upset that the horny embezzler ghost wasn't a character in the main game. And I'm talking about the side story of Haru and Mochi. So the horny embezzler, she surely would improve the mood of the main game. The whole thing was pretty great. I loved the idea. I suppose it dragged on a little, and would have strongly benefited from some sort of character art, CG scenes and backgrounds, but I suppose it was serviceable. Honestly, I just get sad that these side stories weren't bigger, as well as what this is the end. This game just absorbed me this past few days. Over a week now. And I have a single thing left, the last story, and I'm not really excited for it. So my expectations were exactly the same as what I have gotten. A whole lot of pseudo-scientific, semi-philosophical, semi-fantastical techno-babble and a bunch of tips and hints towards something I know nothing of. I have spoiled myself and found that Raging Loop is set in the same universe as another visual novel released earlier, with comments on Reddit stating that Raging Loop is a prequel. Considering how sucked into this I was, having more of this kind of explanation bullshit, not excited. But I will look into it regardless. By the way, I actually did look into it. The game, Raging Loop, might be a prequel, but the other game he released, Amphibian and Chemco, Love, Comedy, Murder, Mystery, something like that. It's called something like that. But the point is, the important thing is what it doesn't have in translation. It's Japanese only. So I guess I can't look into it now. Maybe in a few years, maybe even longer. Just as, sadly, for now, it is the end of Raging Loop for me. So, now that I have gotten some perspective from a game, this is added later, I have to say that the writer is deeply flawed. They have significant amount of talent and can weave a mystery into skill like a skilled seamstress. However, they also have these bizarre ideas and beliefs which they keep hammering into their stories, a lot of which is connected to their ideas about religion and philosophy. I'm betting this person also adores conspiracy theories, cryptids, and all sorts of stuff like that. Not that it's not interesting, but I feel like there is a very delicate balance to strike when telling a story, and they fail horribly to reel themselves in. At times it works though. I very much enjoyed the vague explanations in the final route until revealing everything. And I also adored this huge info dump in the basement with Kionosaki. But when you've got these long repetitive questions toward Chiemi as to what is God and whatever is that last extra story was, and of course let's not forget the fact that it's strongly implied that Rikako raped everyone in the village even when she was a child herself. None of these things needed to be there, and the story would have worked just fine if they were cut. Also, I think I should just mention this, I still don't really grasp what is the God in the eyes of people in the story and the writer's beliefs. How I see it, Fuseishi seems to believe that God is some sort of mass hypnosis. Essentially, people fool themselves into believing something. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but generally it's just people trying to make sense of the world. Like a way to decide whenever their actions are just. Which is how he dug out what was supposed to be God, had the whole village witness it, pretend to be an incarnation of it, and he was slain to pass on the torch to a new god. So instead of Shinai, you would have Haru, who would guide the people into a more just kind of society, where they wouldn't cause feasts where they kill each other, or some other stuff where they get discriminated against by wearing those weird masks. That was his goal, and whatever happened after, he didn't really care. For Chiemi, God is a confusing one. The extra story shows that she saw God in a very Shinto kind of way, as in everything has a God. There are gods in random rocks, in animals, yada yada yada, as well as different cultures having their own concepts of gods. However, then there is her earlier belief that God is a terrifying entity which is within everyone, except for Seishi. And that kind of way to view the concept of God is different. In this situation it's an influence. She was touched by God, meaning she saw it for what it truly was, and it terrified her. But for most people it manifests as some sort of an intangible thing, an aura of sort, which judges the people's actions. Which is probably why the feast was happening. In the god's eyes, this madness of people killing each other was a moral thing, a correct thing, and something that needed to happen, which is of course terrifying. Which is probably also why Fuseishi was scary to her, as he, unlike absolutely everyone and everything thus far in her life, and even in Endless Loop, he alone was unaffected by this. Now, there is also a third version of God, or fourth, or whatever, which is also an intangible thing. Something that wants and needs acting on a whim and manifesting only when certain conditions are met. Again, similar to Shinto, but a bit more personal. This is Haru, meaning she housed the god of a mountain and had certain abilities, although none of them were easily listed. The only obvious ability is reading minds. This god is also able to manifest in other things, such as Miyako, whatever. Such as a little girl at the end of the Darkness Route. And just as a voice to Yasuo in one of the extra stories. Just as what there are a lot of different interpretations depending on the person in the story. Also, while fascinating in a way, I do believe all this talk drags on for far too long still. Personally, I always believe that there is no god, and we're all meaningless specks of dust drifting through cosmos, only to return when we perish. But, well, some part of me wants to believe that there is more to life, or maybe I just want an explanation as to why every time I do 12 pull against Terran, they fall a turtle without counting, and every time I play greedy against anyone, they just blindly do the raciest cheese, which I'm never able to hold. It's just a simple truth to me that whenever I can get screwed in some way, I will be. This is just being a simple explanation. A simple example of StarCraft. But the entire life is just like this. As if some entity out there exists, spending their limitless existence, making my life just a little more randomly miserable. Making all the odds worse, despite even the simplest law of probability. I believe the fact was what this game prompted this much talk from me means that it is a recommendation. And if that doesn't do the trick, I don't know, whatever will.